Now, I've said before that we get to choose our beliefs based on what we find helpful. Beliefs don't have to be correct. They don't have to be factual. And by definition, they can't be. They can't be verified. But the beliefs we choose can help us lead fuller, more joyful and productive and compassionate lives. The choice to believe that we're held by love in every moment of our lives, that there's a love holding us and all that we love, the choice to believe that we're known and accepted fully, loved unconditionally, in my book, it's a pretty good option, especially when we take it to the next level and choose to also believe that our job is to keep working at loving one another just as comprehensively. Our first teachers in the practice of love, of course, are our parents. If we're lucky, they wrapped us up and rocked us and sang us lullabies. I'll love you forever, I'll like you for always. If we were lucky, they responded to our needs and cared for us. They accepted us wholeheartedly and supported us as we grew and became whoever we were meant to be. Unfortunately, most of us are not that lucky. We get people for parents rather than saints. They held a convention for adult children of functional families, and no one came. But seriously, parenting is hard. I love my children with an almost unimaginable fierceness, but it's also part of the job to civilize them, right? You have to give them structure. They need expectations and boundaries. They need to face consequences when their actions cause harm, and it's really tricky to hold that tension between unconditional acceptance and love and accountable relationship. And as if that weren't enough, our entire society is set up to indoctrinate us all into the belief that love is something we have to earn by being better, working harder, making ourselves more beautiful. As Parker Palmer, the Quaker author, educator, and activist, puts it in his book, Let Your Life Speak, we arrive in this world with birthright gifts. Then we spend the first half of our lives abandoning them or letting others disabuse us of them. As young people, we're surrounded by expectations that may have little to do with who we really are, expectations held by people who are not trying to discern our selfhood, but to fit us into slots. In families, schools, workplaces, and religious communities, we're trained away from true self toward images of acceptability. Under social pressures like racism and sexism, our original shape is deformed beyond recognition, and we ourselves, driven by fear, too often betray true self to gain the approval of others. We are disabused of original giftedness in the first half of our lives, and then, if we are awake, aware, and able to admit our loss, we spend that second half trying to recover and reclaim the gift we once possessed. So what's your attitude toward your own lovableness? I'll share a quick story. I was sitting at a table with some colleagues a few years ago, and we got to talking about how we respond to loving critique from our congregants. And my friend Eric said, I just assume that everyone loves me, and if it turns out they don't, I just say, what's wrong with them? My friend Tracy said, I need to spend more time with you, because when someone doesn't love me, I start to wonder what's wrong with me. And then I chimed in, well, that's still better than what I do. When someone does love me, I wonder what's wrong with them. And I was just kidding, but not entirely. There have been times when that really has been my reaction, and I hope I'm not the only one. Now, I've come a long way, especially in the past decade and a half, in part because I've been so well loved by all of you. When a whole community of amazing, kind, honest, admirable people seems to think that you are not just okay, but they even look to you kind of as a leader, it gets harder to hide from your lovability. But to be honest, the shift started before I came to Moscow. I was working with a really wonderful therapist, Dr. James Buskirk, and we'd been talking a lot about this core belief that I had, that I was fundamentally unlovable. We'd gotten to the root of it, which had to do with my parents' imperfect parenting, no surprises. And I'd shared with Dr. Buskirk the story my grandmother used to tell me, the grandmother who came closest to embodying unconditional love in my early life. See, my mom loved to tell stories about what a hard and difficult baby I'd been. How I cried and cried and cried, and nothing she tried would help, and sometimes she just got so overwhelmed she'd stick me in my buggy and put me out on the porch and leave me there. My grandmother, who I called Grandmarie, would shake her head every time she heard that story, and then she'd find a time later to tell me, "You were not a hard baby. I knew just what you needed. I would wrap you up so tight you couldn't move a toe, and you would calm right down." So back to Dr. Buskirk. The turning point came on a day when I was actually trying to fire him. Our finances were tight. He didn't accept insurance. And he just sat back, took off his glasses, and quietly let me know that typically this was a decision that the therapist and the client would make together with some deliberation. And then he looked at me and he said, "I feel like I want to wrap you up so tight you can't move a toe." And something cracked open. I felt this rush of unconditional love coming through Dr. Buskirk, but it was so much bigger than that one person. It was as if the whole universe, or dare I use the word God, were singing, "I'll love you forever, I'll like you for always. Long as I'm living, my baby, you'll be." Oh, yeah. You gotta agree on that. Okay, thank you. Wrapped up so tight I couldn't move a toe. Nothing I could do, nothing I could say, nothing that could happen would or could separate me from that love. And I think that's where it starts. That experience of being held and loved by the universe, by God, by our own self is what enables us to begin to work on offering ourselves unconditional love. That's confusing. Okay. So the experience of being held and loved helps us offer ourselves unconditional love, right? Right. Okay, and that's the primary relationship we have to cultivate, which is why the Buddhist metta practice, the loving kindness meditation we went through last week, it always starts with offering the prayer in first person. May I be happy, may I be well, may I be filled with loving kindness. Now, of course, the difference between conditional and unconditional love is that conditional love is something we have to earn, right? So to experience unconditional self-love, we have to stop believing that we have to earn our self-love by being perfect or better. We have to allow lovability to be our default, our non-negotiable, to feel like solid ground. Without the capacity to love and accept ourselves, warts and all, we'll be unhappy. No amount of success or affirmation will fill that hole inside us if we don't believe we're worthy. With it, though, when we do love ourselves unconditionally, our lives unfold from a place of power and grace. We walk in beauty with gratitude. It feels important to name, though, that our self-love isn't perfect, right? Perfect and unconditional are two different things. Perfect love doesn't exist, even when we have an inside track. To love ourselves unconditionally means we forgive ourselves for those moments when we love ourselves imperfectly, when we're unkind to ourselves. It also means embracing all of our imperfections. We need to stop beating ourselves up, shoulding all over ourselves. Now, when we do, this natural process of growing and becoming unfolds effortlessly, a process that isn't about grit or discipline, but believing that we deserve to be happy and well. self-love gets to be messy. If making our self-love conditional, something that we have to earn, keeps us from happiness, making our love of others conditional is downright toxic. We cause real harm when we choose to believe that our love is something that other people have to earn by doing what we want them to. Control and coercion are the enemies of love. And don't get me wrong, I understand the temptation. Sometimes I think my life would flow ever so much smoothly if everyone would just do what I tell them to. The world would certainly be a better place. If I were in charge, we'd do away with hate and greed and oppression. The government would understand its function to be creating support systems that allow all people to flourish. There would be no more war. We'd use all that money to work on environmental sustainability. And that's not how it works, right? And we wouldn't want it to work that way because maybe I'm the one who gets to be in charge, but maybe someone else gets to be in charge and they don't share my values, and we know what that feels like, right? I don't want to be controlled or coerced. That means I don't get to control or coerce others. I'm the only person I get to control. I'm the only person whose behavior I can change, which doesn't mean I don't have influence. I set limits. I can offer advice and feedback. I can share feelings and reactions. I can inspire and lead by example. People are changed by their relationships, which means that what I do and say matters. It also means everyone around me has influence over me. Every single human being has something to teach us. We're changed by love, and we change the world with our love, but it is a very slow and messy process. Sometimes the people who are hardest for us to love have the most to teach us. Anthony DeMello writes in his book, The Way to Love, this is how you do it. Every time you find yourself irritated or angry with someone, the one to look at is not that person, but yourself. First, look into the very real possibility that the reason why this person's defects or so-called defects annoy you is that you have them in yourself, but you've repressed them and are projecting them unconsciously onto the other. This is almost always true. Search for this person's defects in your own heart, and your annoyance will turn to gratitude that his or her behavior has led you to self-discovery. Another thing is also clear. You become irritated with this person because he or she is not living up to the expectations that have been programmed into you. And maybe you have a right to demand that people live up to your programming, as for instance, when someone is cruel or unjust, but then stop to consider this. In most cases, you have no right to demand that any other person live up to your expectations. Just contemplate this truth, and your irritation will vanish. And here is a final truth. Given the background, the life experience, and the unawareness of this person, he or she cannot help behaving this way. To understand all is to forgive all. When you really understand a person, you see him or her as crippled and not blameworthy, and your irritation instantly ceases. And the next thing you know, you're treating everyone with love, and people are responding with love, and you find yourself living in a loving world which you have yourself created. Greed and hate and tribalism, the roots that feed oppression and injustice, are all flavors of fear. Greed grows from a fear of scarcity. Hatred springs from a fear of the other. Tribalism is rooted in a fear of abandonment. And one thing we know about fear is that it doesn't respond well to logic. We don't reason when we are scared. So to move forward, to be in relationship with the people whose behavior we are hoping might shift toward love, we need to address those underlying fears. If we can cultivate a sense of abundance, people might stop clinging to greed. If we can cultivate familiarity, relationships, the other becomes known. Hate gets a lot harder. No one can hate someone face to face. Tribalism melts away as we invite others into the circle of community, offering them that sense of belonging they're so hungry for. And this is where the path of unconditional love leads us. And when we choose to follow that path, we affirm that every person matters. Our liberation is bound together. No one gets left behind. It is not easy. Loving people is hard work, whether it's your blood family or your church family. In The Restless Heart, Roland Rolheiser, a Catholic theologian and writer, says, only 3 types of persons think that real love is easy: those who are already saints, who through long years of painful practice have made love a habit; manipulators who have confused their own self-gratification with genuine love; and unrealistic dreamers who do not know what they are talking about. Tainted as we are by our own self-concern, genuine love is very hard to attain, and especially to sustain. Humans see insult where none is intended. We rarely feel accepted just as we are. We get self-conscious. Those inner voices of perfectionism and the cultural voices trying to convince us that we need to be more or different can drown out love's voice in our hearts, which is why we have to come here, so that we can listen together, so that we can relax into that sense of the love that holds us, so that our hearts can open again. So that our hearts can open and we can love ourselves better. Our hearts can open and we can love one another and the world more fully. The power of religious community is that it offers an abundance of opportunities to practice loving. There are so many perfectly imperfect people here for you to love, who will perfectly, imperfectly love you back. So no, love isn't always easy, but in the end analysis, it's the only work worth doing. We are the way, the dream of unconditional love we might choose to name God, takes on flesh and blood. We are flawed, but willing vessels. Our job here is to practice embodying unconditional love for each other, to practice offering love freely without conditions, releasing any desire to control or coerce, to practice refraining from changing others, to practice letting go of our expectations, accepting and admiring each other just as we are. Now, it's been my privilege to embody unconditional love to the very best of my ability with and for all of you for 14 of the best years of my life. And you know what? Here it comes. I'll love you forever, I'll like you for always. As long as you're living, my people you'll be. And I know I'm preaching to the choir. You get it already. You know the truth that our power for healing and good rests in the act of loving and in the experience of being loved. You love each other with so much skill and generosity, it just leaves me speechless. As Unitarian Universalists, together, we choose to believe that we are all born and embraced. We are all born embraced by unconditional love. We choose to believe we live and move and have our being embraced by that same love, even and most especially in those moments when we feel alone. We choose to believe that we're called to embody love as best we can for ourselves and for one another. That's what it means to put love at the center. So be it, and so may it be.